Hi, my name's Lara and I'm a current member of the Artisan design team. I'm going to share a couple of projects with you today using the September to December mini catalogue as well as the online exclusives that go live in September as well. I have been scrapbooking since 2003. I had 3 young children at that stage. They are now all grown up. That was sort of over 22 years ago that I started this sort of creative outlet. My grandmothers on both my father and mother's side were avid diary keepers, so they would have a daily diary or note of what they'd been doing, and even though I tried, I was never able to stick with that quite the same. So I took to scrapbooking, and I love that I am able to sort of curate family memories, little moments in time, little snapshots, little things that we have done over the years, and that has changed. What I'm documenting has changed with, it's now sort of more my husband and I doing things, but the friendships that I've made along the way have also continued throughout it, so we still get together, and in a way we've grown up with our children together, and some friends are even documenting their grandchildren, which is exciting as well. Being a member of the Artisan design team has been amazing. The opportunities to create with things I wouldn't necessarily purchase to create with, the team that we work with, it's just been a wonderful year so far. Still a few more months to go. Over here in New Zealand, we're just sort of coming to the end of winter and starting spring, so it's kind of like there's a freshness and things to what we're doing. So I just want to say thank you, Emma, for inviting me to share today, and I'm going to flip to my other camera so that you can see what I'm going to be working with today. Just look at this lovely pile here of things. So the photos I'm going to be scrapbooking are of a wedding bouquet of a friend who got married recently, and I'm going to be using the early espresso and old olive threads. I have just flipped through the tags there, so that's the pattern tags dies. I'm going to use some of the leaves from this Harvest Home Garland kit, and I'm going to use this white velvet paper as well, so it's a little bit fuzzy. You can't quite see the beautiful nature of it here, but it just adds a nice softness to the finish. And the paper, or the DSPs that I'm going to use here, is all part of the Autumn Toil, and there's sort of 3 of each design, and on one side they're a little bit more patterned, and on the other side we have more of a neutral texture, and it's mainly these neutral sides that I'm going to be using. I just really liked how the early espresso sort of helped the greens and the whites of this bouquet sort of stand out, so that's why I've selected this collection for it. So there's that white velvet, and just sort of seeing how they all layer up together, and the deer dots as well as a couple of the inks. So what I'm going to do first is sort of prepare my background. I have sped this up a bit. I have a 10-minute time limit, so I am just showing you that process of building up the colour. Now I had the piece of paper, the DSP down the bottom there that's going to be on the finished layout, and that was just sort of to indicate where things will start. Now you'll notice that it's sort of quite heavyish down that base piece there. That's not a problem, because with the layout design I've got in my head, I'm going to actually cover this up with some of those pattern tags dies. So I'm just sort of building up some of the colours. Now the colours I selected here were the ones labelled as going with that Autumn Toil DSP. So you'll just saw here that I added some splatters of water, and I'm now just using the heat tool just sort of to dry them up a little bit more. I find that if I dry the front and the back, it seems to flatten out a little bit better. So now I'm going to add some white sort of splatters on here, so adding a little bit of water to that white ink, rather than it just sort of being super thick. Now this does take quite a while to dry, so I would suggest that you go and do some other things while you let this dry if you don't have a heat tool. So we'll get that dried, and I'm going to pop that aside and work on some of those tags and things. So what I have done off screen there, just so that you're not seeing all of the things, is I went and cut out those tags from the DSP. I've used sort of a few of the patterns as well as the plain one. So now I'm just going to cut down this sort of white velvet paper to the right thickness, and I am going to do the same with our adhesive paper here. I quite like to back die cuts, especially when they're going to be titles, so that it means that when I go to stick them down on the page, they stick down a lot better. Now this particular size, the party alphabet, doesn't need it quite so much. You've got a good surface there for sticking things down. So now I'm sort of playing a bit of a jigsaw puzzle to try and get those pieces to fit on there. It meant that I didn't put them in order, but playing around with that Y means that all of those letters fit in. So then I'm just going to put them through my mini die cut machine, my mini stamp and emboss, I should say, and I am going to cut those out. The next component I want to share with you is using the Harvest Home Garland Kit leaves that I've taken out here. I am going to use our handy little tool to poke some holes all the way through the leaves, so that on one side there's sort of an indent and one side it pokes out a little bit. I'm using the indented side as my guide, and I am sort of poking the holes, thinking about the fact that I'm going to need two, because I'm not going to fill these in and do sort of go back and do the back stitch. I'm just going to leave that slip stitch kind of in there because I want it to be obvious that I've got stitching. When I look at this layout, the flower bouquet was actually put together on the morning of the wedding, and we sort of put it together right there and then, so it's sort of got that homemade feel as well as that nice sort of effect. So I wanted the slip stitch to look homemade. So I've gone ahead, poked those holes in, grabbed my needle and threaded it up with the old olive linen thread, and now I'm just sort of going to go through and do my stitching. So I've finished all of that stitching, and on some of them I am going to do a little bit more later on, but I realised that I would quite like to add a bit more texture and interest around the edge. So I'm just using the little finger daubers to add some of the similar coloured ink around the edges. Another technique I want to share with you is how I sort of put my photos and my photo mats together. So often I don't just stick them down as they are. I like to sort of mess up the edges a little bit. So I'm just using the adhesive here to stick these down, and then I am going to sort of wrinkle up or pull up each of the edges. I like the texture that this adds. See how I'm just sort of tucking those papers in towards the front of the photo? It works in some ways similar to distressing the edges with scissors, but I just like that it doesn't actually look rough. It just adds a little bit of dimension and a wee bit of tearing at times, but it doesn't have that rough edge. So now it's time to stick down some of these leaves. I am using the green Tombow here just because the stitching does make them a little bit raised, and I didn't want to use too much of the dimensionals in behind it. So here we have the finished layout. You'll see I've gone and added a little bit more ink blending, one of the stamps from that set, Picture Perfect again, and that's using the early espresso. I have adhered everything down. We've got all the bits and pieces, plus I've gone and added some of these lovely little dots all around there, so you can sort of see a little bit of that texture on the page. I've also put together a card that uses a lot of these components from the stitching in those leaves, the colouring in of our protea, and those little embellishments as well, and just fussy cut the hello out there. So there we have them. Thank you for your time today, and I hope that you will have some ideas or a technique or something that you want to take from what I've shared with you into your own creativity or things that you want to share with your customers. Thanks again.